All right, hey everybody, I am back with the Buick and we are working on suspension. Take a look. So in earlier episodes, you saw me redo the entire brake system. So it's got new lines, front to back, shoes pads, rotors, master, the whole thing. But one thing I haven't touched yet is the suspension. So we will be working on tie rods, coils, shocks, control arms, ball joints. If it bounces, it's gotta go. So everything here is super old. And also while I'm tackling the suspension, I'm also going to tackle some frame damage. All right, so if you take a look at this frame horn right here, this is the frame. So this goes front to back. Look at that huge hole. My hand can barely cover it up. So we've got that linking up to the idler arm. On the other side, we've got it about the same next to the steering gear. All of that is, yeah, pretty bad. So that's why I've been really hesitant on taking this out for any type of drive. I want to make sure that I'm safe. And in order to get this taken care of, we're gonna have to cut all of that cancerous out. So it ends, all the rot ends about here. Like just past this, that's where it ends. And we start to get into good metal right around here. So I have two choices. I can either go K-member, which is cut this entire part off, weld the entire front together into like a tubular support, or I can get replacement frame horns or like sections from here to the front and weld those in. And the latter is what I'm gonna go with today. So I've got replacement ones on the way, and as soon as they get here, we'll get right to it. All right, I lied. I got them already, but I need to wait on a plasma cutter and some other consumables that I'll need to actually chop this frame apart. So in the meantime, I'm gonna start disassembling the front end. I pretty much know how things are gonna go together, so I am not concerned about tearing it all apart right now. But I do wanna save time, and I know the packages are on its way. So let's just get as much as all of this out of the way as possible, and it'll allow us to see the frame better and get into a position where we can actually replace these parts when the time comes. So here goes. Took me a while to find a good camera angle, but I loosened the ball joints up, so right there, and one more right here, but they are so stuck on. I've even tried hammering right here and right down there. No luck. So I may get a pitchfork, try to squeeze it in there and then hammer that. Hopefully it'll pop out. In the meantime, I'm gonna work on this, this coil and shock setup. So if you see this little dirt rod in here, that is the shock absorber. And I need to be able to get that off so I can get my spring compressor tool inside. Now, there's a nut up on top of here that is very difficult to show you, but I need to get that off so that when I unscrew it from the bottom, I'll be able to basically disassemble this thing. But the nut is spinning with the rod. So I'm going to put some pliers right up here at that shiny rod part. And hopefully with that, once it rests itself against the side of the car, you'll be able to see that start to break up. Let's try that out. All right, so I got the nut off and here is the stud that's the very top of the shock. Now notice there are like ridges where you can put like an 8 or a 10 millimeter, I think 8 millimeter here, and kind of work the nut off. What I was hoping for, an old mechanic taught me this trick. If it's old and seized on there, as soon as you start turning on this nut, the entire stud will break. And that's what I was hoping for. But I guess it's in good enough condition to screw off, so it came off like that. But this trick works. You can also come up top with it, but I've had much more success going this route. It self-jams, so as long as you put enough tension on this vice grip, you're good to go. So this is my coil spring compressor tool. If you're looking at this, it's power built 648-628. And what it does is it goes up inside of this shock tower and clamps on both sides of the coil. And once you get it small enough, it should be able to pop out in between these control arms. So it's real easy. I'd say just get the nut side facing down and insert it through here. And once you do that, you can start clamping things down. You're off to the races. So I repositioned off camera and I got something important to tell you all. So when you are getting ready to whale on these things, on these, on this section and this section to get the control arms to release, make sure you have the nut in there. Otherwise, the coil is just going to like bounce around and explode. So what I did is I moved my jack stand over here. I've got my jack on it, and after hitting a couple of times, both sides released. As you can see, we have gap there and we have gap there. So now we're in a prime position to take the spindle off. And it's just gonna be nice and easy, you know, just relieving pressure. But now we have our jack here so we can apply pressure. Well, if my front end was heavier, but we'll just take it one turn at a time, get these loose and get the coil out of here. Now, the coil spring compressor, it's at its max right now. The rod goes all the way up and it's hitting the inside of the frame right now. And that hole that the shock bolts up to is just a little too small for this to pass through. So what I'm hoping is, as we relieve tension and get the coil spring to expand, it's gonna catch. And it's gonna prevent it from bouncing out at us. And of course, then I'll be able to get the spindle off, get that off, get the little control arm, and then the entire front end is basically resolved at that point. So here goes. So this is the old spring, and as you can see, it's still under a lot of tension. All four tangs are firmly against it. And I felt like this was so hard to come out because there's so much spring sag in it already. So we kind of had to crank down on it to get to a point where it would pop off. But this is easily the best 30 bucks you can spend when doing your suspension. Because even though we didn't actively use it to compress all the way, it still served as a really good check and making sure that the entire coil didn't just explode, because these can be really, really dangerous. And just in case you don't believe me about how much compression this is actively working on, let me show you. Yeah, that's a good 2 inches of compression. So really great tool. Pick up one before you start working on your G-body. All right, that came out pretty nicely. And what I was looking at were 2 bolts going in there, 13/16 on the front, 18mm nuts, and make sure you grab these alignment shims on the back. I had 2 on the front, 3 on the back, just to make sure once you get everything put back together, you can add them there. We're going to have to get an alignment done anyway, but might as well have it easy for the guy. All right, and this is the entire front end disassembled. Let me show you what we got over here. lower control arm, upper control arm, spindle with wheel bearing and rotor, coil spring, and shock absorber. So like I said, all those parts are coming in soon. I'll get this side cleaned up and we can take a closer look at a plan on how we plan to cut this frame. So if you look real close, and I mean real close, you'll figure out why this side was sagging. Let me try to get the light in on it. Yes, right there in the middle of the screen, that is a cracked spring. And it goes to that part right there. So that has caused the entire left side to sag and makes it a little bit tricky to get the spring out, but I'll try the spring compressor and hopefully we can get it out. Last little bit left is the, oh gosh, the pitman arm, the idler arm, leading up to the steering gear. Of course, this middle piece, it's escaping me right now. But all in all, what I wanted to show you was this frame. So, as you can see, it's pretty rusted, and I wanted to go over my plan of attack. Now, the steps are bracing. You have front end components on this car still. You still have the front bumper, you have the header panel, you got the fenders, you got the radiator and the core support and all of that. You want to make sure that all of that is still supported so that your frame, if it's level, it doesn't do this. Because that's going to make it impossible for you to weld everything back in straight. So you're going to need to make a jig, which is basically supports on the front end that makes sure that this frame doesn't move. Now we're leaving a lot of frame in here, so it's likely not going to move. There's probably only 400 pounds, if that, on the front of this car. And this metal should be more than enough to hold it, but we're not taking chances. This is frame repair. So, step 1, make a plan. Step 2, grind it away. Step 3, verify that your metal is good beyond the points. Step 4, cut it out. Step 5, measure, fit, and then weld. So that's the plan. I'll do the same thing on the other side, make sure everything looks good, and I'll take you along for the ride as I cut. The plasma cutter is not here yet, so we got one more day until it arrives. In the meantime, I'll get the entire surface prepped. We'll get that, the remaining steering components out of the way, and we'll be one step closer. I can't wait, because this is the only thing that's standing in our way of taking longer test drives. We've got everything tuned up to a good point. We've taken care of brakes, cooling, tires for the most part. We can get this out on the road, but this is the final piece, and we're finally at the point where we can take care of it. So thanks for watching so far. All right, so here we are. We've got pretty much all of it grinded away. There are a couple of purple spots that you'll see near the top, but that's all right. I'm getting a really good feel for what looks good and what doesn't. And it looks like for the most part, I'm highlighting areas that look to be good. So we're gonna weld back in new metal on top of good metal, and everything will look great. So, and it'll be strong. So that's the most important part. Stronger than this anyway. So I'll finish up the rest of this off camera. As you can see, I got pretty much the entire steering linkage off except for at that pitman arm. So I'll try to get a better angle to get that off. And we'll do the same thing on this side after we remove the steering gear. All right, so we are in position getting ready to cut out the rotted frame section of the Grand National. So I've got my area cleaned up, I've got my grounding clamp on, and I've got my Cut 50 DP. So this is a Pilot Arc plasma cutter that I just picked up for Prime Day. It was 159 bucks. Had some really good reviews on it, and I'm ready to test it out. If you've seen previous projects that I've worked on, I've used a plasma cutter before. I didn't have the best time with the previous ones because they were scratch start. Pilot Start is going to be better for what we're trying to do and just a better overall cut. So without further ado, I'll get into this now. So I'm a little nervous on this, to be completely honest. I have not done frame repair. I've read books on it. You know, I went to auto school, so there was a little bit covered on that, but not really, because I was on the auto repair side of the lens and not on the collision side. But I've been reading, watching videos, and just asking people who know, and I feel like I'm confident enough to attempt this. And if it doesn't work, then we have other options that we can pursue, but I'm just out here with my knowledge, and I'm willing to go at it. So watch me work. I feel like Hancock. All right, well, that's out. Russ took care of half of that, but me and the plasma cutter took care of the rest. So with that out, we can actually get this cleaned up a little bit more. So I took a shot at grinding down the edges. You know how the plasma cutter leaves a bunch of wrinkled edges, but started to grind it down. I'll clean it up a little bit more. I got the inside of this too, but still got a ways to go. Solid progress, solid progress. Take another look at this. You know, when it comes up to the idler arm, it's still really thick. If you look at the bottom eyelet of this hole, you can see it has full metal there. But soon after that, it just starts to whittle away. So I'm really happy I got rid of that. And everything that remains on the car looks like really good metal. As you look close to up here, you're seeing, you know, full metal, no rust, no degradation. So should have a really good time welding it back in and there's a lot of good metal to weld to, so all good. All right, with that old piece out, now I can kind of compare it to the new piece that we're working with and go from there. So what the plan is, I've marked out end to end where each is. I'll burn in like maybe a quarter or a half an inch and get rid of the sections that I don't need. And then of course I'll skin off the top. So just kind of thinking like this has a toupee, right? And you're just gonna cut right off the top. So this entire piece will go away, since of course that is existing on the car still. And then we can trim to fit. As you know, on this side, everything stays pretty close to the top, but then, you know, I have this indentation. I have this little indentation right here. So I'll be looking to cut that out after all of the rest of the unwanted sections of the replacement frame is accounted for. So once we get it pretty close, we'll go to cardboard templates, you know, just making sure that everything is as it is, and then we'll fine tune the cuts. And then we'll get it burned in. I have a whole process of how I'm going to weld the replacement in. So, you know, we'll go with that, and it'll be as strong as factory. So no concerns there. All right, so I made my plan. I've got everything marked out. I've built in like a few eighths of an inch on each side, so I know I'm good. On the bottom, what I'm going to do is I'm going to flush mount it, so it's going to be butt welded at the bottom and lap welded on the sides and lap welded across the top. So I got it as close as possible. I can see that that fold-in mark on both sides. I've got a little bit more on this side than I need, so I can work it that way. On this side, I have more than enough, and so I can continue to trim and cut as I get closer. And of course, on the top, we're going to scalp it. So it's going to be, you know, pretty much all off on that point, and we're gonna weld toward the very top of this to the frame. So I am using my 4.5 inch cutoff wheel. You may be asking, I have a perfectly good plasma cutter. Why do I need to use this? Now, plasma cutters create slag, and all that melted metal, we're gonna have to grind off, clean up, all of that. So this is gonna take a little bit longer, but in the grand scheme of things, I won't have to clean it up as much. So this is a win. Here goes. All right, so here it is, all cut and cleaned up. That was pretty quick. I know it was a few seconds for you all, but it was maybe about 30 minutes for me. So, and I also had a little snafu. I accidentally cut my my power cord, so I have to mend that back up. But in any case, we've got the outer edges all polished up. I know I'm gonna have to do some more trim to fit cutting. So I even got the inside of it too, which is really, really nice. This was a pretty good piece. There's a little bit of surface rust here, but nothing like what we removed already. So now it's just step 4, trim to fit. So here goes. All right, so made some solid progress here. Gotten everything lightly hammered in place. Well, it's far from in place. As you can see, we still have a gap here, an even bigger gap over here, and subsequent gaps up here. But we're identifying areas that we need to trim and to massage so we can get it in. So I'm taking a look at the contour of the frame on the inside, making sure that the lines are matching up. And I'm also taking note of the measurements that I made earlier to see where these bolt holes line with other parts of the frame. So that's something I'm doing off camera, but it's something that's very important and you need to make sure you're doing it too. Now, what I'll do is I'll continue making measurements, making marks, making cuts, until we get to a point where it's in place. This is boring, so I'm gonna save you from it. And in 3 seconds, we'll have a frame piece that's pretty much ready. 3. All right, so here we are, and I've gotten everything clamped in place to a really, really great point. As you can see, it's lining up right around here and over there. And I'll show you what it looks like underneath this right here. All right, so here we are. What I've done is I've spot welded additional points in here just to make sure that we can overlap on the sides effectively. I really want this to be as strong as possible. And there's also going to be reinforcement going in afterwards. So this will make sure that I can accurately weld the entire frame through and through. And you're seeing really good penetration on some of these spot welds too. So we're looking really good on both sides. So I'll get that piece back in place, make sure everything lines up, do my measurements, and then we'll burn it in. All right, so here we are. Everything is tack welded in place. We've got all 4 corners on both sides zapped, and now we can just slowly go around and zip the rest of it in. I'm really liking the feel and the look of it. All of the lines match, all of the measurements match. So, first of all, I've been burning in everything using my Yes Welder 205 DS, and it's been working really well for me using 110. But because of what we're welding and just a little bit for me, I would like to switch off to use the 220 port. So I can use this using the dryer plug that's on the other side, but this does not match up to the dryer plug. So I'm waiting on an adapter to come from Amazon that will convert my dryer plug to this and an extension cord of about 20 feet. I've gotten 8 gauge wiring, so it's gonna be totally safe coming from there to here. And that'll allow me to weld up everything without tripping circuit breakers, without using extension cords that may not be up to the task. I wanna make sure it's done right, and I feel confident being behind the wheel. So I'm just going to take that extra precaution. So while we wait for that to come, I can at least get started on the other side, remove the steering gear, take a look at what the rest looks like underneath there, and then formulate a plan to get that out and prep a piece to get it in. Hoping that the welder attachments make it, before this evening. It'll allow me to get the frame all situated this weekend, which is really what I want to do. I really want to start putting back together the suspension and getting it back on the road because I can see the finish line in sight. Let's do it.